When it comes to buying a home, most first-time buyers really worry about, are they buying the right property? Are they getting it at a good price? What pitfalls do they need to avoid? And importantly, what level of survey should they have? Not to mention getting confused between a valuation that a lender does and an actual higher level of survey that is for their benefit. Thankfully, we're joined today by Daniel Knight, who runs Homescan Surveyors. He's been self-employed for 3 years running his own surveying company. He's an associate member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and hopefully he's going to shed some light on how the survey process works, what's the difference between the surveys, which one people should consider, what can and can't surveyors do, and actually what potential hints and tips for first-time buyers when they're looking at properties, when they're viewing properties, might be useful to them. So thanks, Dan, for giving up your Saturday morning and doing this, because I'm sure you got much better things to be doing than talking to me and chatting about your day job.
I have nothing better to do than this. This is all I love to do. So I'm happy to spread what I know and hopefully help some people.
Awesome. So thank you for being here. So I guess the first thing is, I've given you a brief introduction, but how did you end up getting into surveying? And if you could go back, would you do anything different? Let's just start off with a bit about you.
So I've always had an interest in property. I lived in the States for a long time. So I lived in Southern California for 10 years and then moved back to the UK. And I think living there has actually made me love property even more, because everything in Southern California, they have earthquakes, the weather's hot, so everything's a timber box. Meanwhile, I came back here and I was like, oh, the culture, I love it. And that pushed me into property even more. So I thought, once again, into property, became a real estate agent for a short time, realized that wasn't really for me, but through that found surveying and thought, oh, this is more my wheelhouse. I don't want to sit at a desk all day. I want to be out and about as well. And then I went to a open day for the course I did called the Sava course. They gave me the whole rundown of what the profession is, what they do. And I thought, yeah, this is for me. And was off to the races, really.
And that was it. And you're straight in. And now you've blown up on TikTok and Instagram, telling people and explaining all the various things from, what to look out for when people are viewing your property to, I saw one the other day about, not wood beetle, but it is a beetle, woodworm. You're saying it's not a worm, it's a beetle.
Yeah, at certain stages. What happens with those videos is I just kind of get a thing, like some of them I already know, but some of them I get just a bee in my bonnet about. I don't know that much about exactly this. And then I go deep dive it and it's like, this would be a good video. If I find this interesting, I'm sure other people do. And then in those instances they have, which is nice to see.
To be fair, it gets a lot of uptake. It gets a lot of uptake, and understandably, because when people are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds and tying that up with a load of debt, usually, they want to make sure that they're buying the right home, and then they're not getting the wool pulled over their eyes. I've seen some catastrophic outcomes for people where they haven't had surveys. Whether or not a survey would have picked up, I don't know, but they hadn't had a survey, and then all of a sudden they landed with a huge bill, or a property that's actually hazardous to their health, and then can't live there for however long until it's rectified. So I guess the first question is, why is there so much confusion among first-time buyers? Why is there so much confusion, do you think, among first-time buyers between valuations for mortgage lenders and surveys? And of course, you are qualified to do valuations, but can you just give us a kind of an idea of what's happening on a valuation, what's happening on a survey? Why does that confusion exist?
Because they're both being done by a surveyor. So they think a surveyor is going around to the property, which may or may not happen. For some valuations, the surveyor may not even go to the property. But they think a surveyor is going around to the property and they think that therefore it is going to be inspected. But the amount of time at the property, the amount of care taken varies greatly between the levels of survey and between the surveyors. So for a mortgage valuation, a surveyor might be there for 10, 15 minutes. And their job is to ensure that the bank is happy lending on that property. So there's nothing at that property that means that if you defaulted on your mortgage, that they wouldn't be able to reclaim that property and get their money back. That is why they're there. There are many things that the bank might not care about that you will want to know. But with a level...
Carry on.
So, but with a level 2 or level 3, that is you instructing a surveyor to go around and provide you with a comprehensive overview of the property to a different level. Now, we can get into the difference between level 2s and level 3s, but I don't know if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the valuations, when it comes to mortgage valuations, more and more lenders now are reliant upon automated valuation models provided by various data analytics companies, where you key the application in, you put the postcode in, and depending on the loan to value and how much data the lender can find out about that particular property, that area, that postcode, and if they've got any concerns, then it kind of does a round trip through their algorithm, however that works, and says, yeah, we're okay. And there's no one actually been to see that property at all. And there could be a multitude of things hiding within the property, all the way from damp and, rotten timbers to spray foam in the loft that's installed incorrectly. And I think one of the problems here is that because of a lack of education, because this isn't something that is taught anywhere, I wonder how many people buy a home that's never actually had anyone cast their eye over it, simply an algorithm going, yeah, we're okay with that, to then find out, oh my God, what's going to happen here? Do you have, you must have some horror stories about that, which we'll come on to. But this is one of the reasons why I'm always very vocal with, well, with anyone, but particularly with first-time buyers, because they're often the least experienced, typically the most nervous, and generally borrowing a huge amount of cash with a relatively small deposit. They've got very little buffer in there, usually, to have a high level of survey. One of the questions that often gets thrown at me is, but it's an additional cost and I'm not really sure I can afford it. And I try to frame it as it's not really a cost, it's more an investment. That always sounds like some kind of sales pitch. But when you're kind of saying, well, actually a level 2, a level 3 survey might be 6, 7, 8, £1,000, but that might actually stop you buying this property. And whilst you think that's a bad thing, it might be a very good thing if you've got 25 grand of work. So if you were to give, not advice, because I don't want to get into trouble with any of our regulatory bodies, but how important do you think it is for anyone that's buying the home, but particularly first-time buyers, to have that high level of survey, to have that high level of appraisal on the property?
It's very easy for me as a surveyor to sit here and say, get a survey, because of course I want you to get a survey.
You're biased.
But
Yeah.
I will come out and say straight out the gate, you can waste money on a survey. If you get a bad survey, it can be a waste of money. And there's people that come to you and go, I didn't get a survey, or I got a survey and it was a complete waste of money. They could be completely true. And I've seen them and I read them and people send me them all the time. And I read them and I go, this isn't helpful at all. It's either no information or it's a lot of waffle about, like I've read reports where there was like 6 paragraphs on wood boring beetle, types of wood boring beetle, how they affect timber, just for them to say, but there wasn't any beetle in the property. And I'm like, why are you writing this? And they're writing it just to fluff up a report. So is a good surveyor worth it? 100%. How they're worth it is they're either they may help you avoid a really bad investment where, again, you could have like a new roof that could be anywhere between like 15 to £30,000 potentially, depending on where you live and the size of the property. They could help you with renegotiating, where if you're buying a property and you're not even thinking about it, I've had many clients renegotiate and say 10 times what the survey cost based on those things. So all of that, you can get your money back in that sense. But if there's nothing to renegotiate on and there's nothing to put you off the sale, then you've just got peace of mind. And then you know that at least a professional has done a visual inspection of the property, and to the best of, like, to a reasonable certainty that there's very little to worry about in this house. There's always risks. There's always things like clay subsoils and trees and drains and plumbing. There's always risk when buying a house, and there'll always be maintenance, but at least you are well informed of your purchase. And I think that there is a assumption that buildings are somehow quite simple, or houses are quite simple. These things get extremely complex. Like I've been going for 3 years, learning almost virtually every day, and I'm still feel like I've barely scratched the surface. I know professionals that have been in it for 30, 40 years that will say every day is a school day. So there's so much to learn. There's so many specialties. And for people like me and the person you're instructing to inspect your property, we are like GPs, is the way I say it. We can, if you're getting your house surveyed, you want to liken it to a physical at a doctor. They'll knock on your knee, they'll look in your ears, up your nose, but you're not getting a full MRI. And that is how you have to look at it as your house. You're getting a GP who's going into your house to give you a general advice about the property. Now, if the GP puts their stethoscope up to your chest and they hear you cough and they go, well, that's a problem, we can still see things like that. But we might not locate that tiny little thing here or there that could be a headache. And that kind of gets into like the limitations of a survey, which we can get into as well.
So before we get into that then, so could you just go through, so what are the key differences between a level 2 and a level 3 survey when it comes to actually buying? What are the differences, and when would you choose one or the other?
So this is a debated topic, because what defines the difference between a level 2 and level 3 is called the Home Survey Standard. And if you're really curious about the exact differences, you can go read that. But that's now being rewritten as they're trying to make it more specific and have more requirements. But really, the general advice is that a level 2 is for a standard property and a level 3 is for a more challenging property. I use those very broad terms on purpose because it is quite complex in that regard. But something I get my bee in a bonnet about is I only do level 3 surveys. And the reason I choose to only do level 3 surveys is because it allows me to do less work and provide that more bespoke care to my clients. I can talk to them, know their name, know what property they're buying, only do 2 to 3 surveys a week, go to the property, speak to them, have an hour and a half debrief call after they've read the report. They can call me a week later. I remember their name, I remember their property. and I can help them throughout that process, and that's the service I like to provide. So that is suitable for any property. So, and in the home survey standard, a level 3 is suitable for any property. A level 2 is the dumbed down version of that. So in every regard, you are getting less advice. So it is the concerns when getting between choosing between a level 2 and a level 3 is, if you want to be 100% sure, just get a level 3. If you think there's not much really wrong with the house, we just want to know if there's anything we really need to be concerned about, then get a level 2. So a level 2 is almost gambling that there's nothing wrong. So you're saying, I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't want to pay for the full whack. Hopefully it's just that, just give me the level 2. But
So, Colin, sorry, Colin.
no, I'm just going to keep rambling. Go for it.
What's the cost difference between a level 2 and a level 3 survey? Because if there's not much cost difference, then it would make sense to have the level 3 every day of the week.
So it's depending on the client and depending on the property. So the location, all these different things. For me, a level 3 survey always hovers around £1,000 to £1,500. I haven't really gone too far up that unless it's quite a substantial property. Level 2s, you're kind of looking at least around £500. I think anything lower than that would be a bit questionable. But there's something you need to understand as a client when it comes to the business models of surveying. So with those numbers, let's say a level 3 is £1,000 and a level 2 is £500. Is a level 3 twice the work of a level 2? I would say it's more than that. So I think that a lot of surveyors could reasonably do competently 5 level 2s a week. But could you do and then they're doing £2,500. But could you do 3 level 3s a week and make £3,000 consistently? Like, I work weekends, I don't really care, but I think most people will kind of stick it around 2. It is more profitable to do more. And there's surveyors out there doing 8, 10 surveys a week for level 2s. So that's a lot of business incentive to push level 2s over level 3s. Again, there's also the incentive that if a surveyor might not be competent to provide the level 3 service on a type of property, they would hope to provide the level 2, and then they aren't required to really know what's going on in that sense, which is a concern. And that's real. Like, there are people that only offer level 2s for that reason. They might argue other reasons, but I'm skeptical of that, and I want people to be aware of that.
You see, almost no one will have ever heard that before.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain almost no one will. Well, yeah, to be honest, we're not that dissimilar in that respect, because I say this kind of stuff about mortgages, where it's a case of, let's have a look at what the incentives are happening under the hood, and then people are always a little bit shocked, when you see, for example, certain businesses that may offer no fee options, but they will be quite forceful with insurance, and then there'll be something in the background where they're actually getting paid a higher commission that's just loaded into premiums, and actually you're not saving cash because you're going to be paying X amount of thousands of pounds more in premium for your insurance over the term of the mortgage, etc. These kind of things that lie in the background that on the face of it seem this is a great deal, but actually, yeah, it really isn't.
Yeah. And that's for people sitting there wondering if they should choose a level 2 or level 3, and they're like, that's great, Dan, but you still haven't really helped me. My advice to everyone now, it used to be like, try figure it out. Now it is find a good surveyor. So I've seen surveyors that only do level 2s, but are competent to do level 3s, but they're just reserved. They don't really want to step outside in that comfort zone. But I read their level 2s, and I'm like, this is a damn good report. Like, you could do this. And they're like, no, don't worry about it. And then I see level 3 surveys that aren't even level 1s. So just what's written on the front of the report is not nearly as important as the surveyor you choose. So my advice to choosing surveyors is find surveyors that you know the name of the surveyor doing the job. You can speak to that surveyor at least after. I understand a lot of surveyors have admin people trying to manage leads and things like that. So I'm not as pushy as like you have to speak to them before. But just like, obviously reviews, you never know. But just make sure that you know the surveyor, you get a sample report from the surveyor, because asking for a sample report sets that benchmark for the quality they have to meet. So ask for a sample report. They should be happy to send one over. Read through that and ask yourself, is this report written bespoke to this property? Or could this be any property in England? Is it just saying the property has a chimney, here's everything that could go wrong with the chimney, best of luck? Or is it actually giving you advice and giving you like next steps on what you have to do in relation to future maintenance as well? For instance, when I write a report, I'm not thinking of it as just this, like, yes, it is a snapshot in time, but it's also hopefully a manual for you to use during a renovation or during future work. So you go, oh, did the surveyor mention this or not? Doesn't mean necessarily messed up not mentioning it, but at least then you can understand the advice in there when you get around to doing that work.
So out of interest, so in terms of actually when you go around for a survey, what's the first thing that you're looking at? Because I assume it starts from the moment you kind of drive up and you're scoping out the area, presumably looking for potential environmental factors that might affect a property. That could be trees, it could be the type of soil, whatever it may be. So what talk me through the actual surveying process from the point that you get instructed to the point that you're passing that report back to a client?
So the whole process basically goes, you're instructed to do a survey. You arrange the survey date with the agents and the vendors. You go around, do the survey. No, actually, I'll go back. You research the property. Normally, at least I do, before going to the property. There's many softwares out there that provide information such as planning permissions, building regulations, flooding risk, ground conditions for clay subsoils, sand subsoils, all these different things.
Out of interest,
Uh,
which software do you use for that? Which softwares are available for that?
I use Sprift. So
See, I use
Sprift,
Sprift, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but all that information is available online as well. So it's not a requirement to have to pay for these services if you know what to look, but it's knowing what to look for as well. But they just kind of group it all together, and it makes my life easier as well. But so then from there, I got a general understanding of the property that combined with the right move and looking at the agent's pictures and any past pictures as well, Sprift might have for me. Then I go around, do the inspection. For me, I start in the roof structure and work my way down. So that's a good point. I get asked a lot while I look in the roof. Both level 2s and level 3 surveys, they should look in the roof. It's only on like a mortgage valuation that I think they wouldn't or might not. Basically, when it comes to roof inspections, they will at minimum inspect from the loft hatch, provided it's less than 3 meters high. But if it's boarded, they will enter it, but they won't go in and walk over ceiling joists and risk falling through someone's ceiling, because doing that day in, day out on your own is a safety risk.
It's going to happen at some point, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then you're going to hear about a bunch of surveyors' legs dangling from ceilings across the country, which you're not going to want them to see. So I'll start on the roof structure, then I work my way down room by room, and then do the outsides. And then I use a drone as well to look at the roof coverings and the chimney, which not everyone does. There's no requirement to use a drone. There's a lot of kit that surveyors aren't required to use. Drones are one of them. But
so if we start in the roof then, one of the things that most people aren't aware of is particularly that, and it's become apparent more and more, it's more and more prevalent now, is with spray foam insulation in the loft, where it's either the wrong type of insulation or it's been installed incorrectly. And many people I've seen where it's got spray foam and I go, whoa, right, hang on a minute. Let's just park that. What type? Has it got any warranties? And then many buyers are unaware as to why that would be a bad thing. Many sellers are unaware. They've had it installed. They've perhaps been sold this, this as a way to cut their energy bills, not realizing that can have a negative impact on the roof. Can you just kind of talk through how that can impact a roof and why so many mortgage lenders are anti-spray foam insulation?
yes, so the issues with spray foam is that it's been, so with a traditional cold roof structure, which I'm trying to keep this without diagrams, it might be difficult, but with a cold roof, the idea is that your house is insulated, but the roof is breathable, quote unquote, breathable. And I think the air in there is allowed to evaporate out. If you alter that, if you create a warm roof rather than a cold roof, you're then insulating at rafter level. Doing that requires building regulation. And the reason is because you need to still keep a gap to allow the air to rise up the roof and out. So that it needs to be a well-designed and well-constructed vapor permeable layer in that sense, or restricted layer. The concern is if you go into a roof structure and all they're doing is just coating it on, then that is going to reduce the evaporation and cause condensation on the rafters. So when the air rises up, it will touch those cold rafters and condense. And the biggest concern is you can't see it. So through that so with a visual inspection, the limitations of it, surveyors are going into loft spaces. We know that inappropriately applied spray foam insulation can cause problems. We can't see it though. So the risk level just goes astronomical and people go, oh, I'm not touching it now. And that is basically what happened. So my mentor, Jeff Hunt, has done a lot of work with spray foam, trying to get everyone to calm down, to say, this is how we assess spray foam. There's been guidance released on, is spray foam really a problem? But the fact is, if the bank cares, your surveyor cares and you care. And if a bank isn't willing to touch it, then it doesn't matter what the surveyor says. If the surveyor goes up there and goes, it looks like there's no manifesting issues at this time, it's been installed for this amount of time, I would expect to see something at this point. That might not be good enough for the bank. And that's what you kind of need to understand about that. So basically at this point, it's almost, if there's spray foam, pretty much no lenders want to touch it. And then it's getting it removed by an appropriate remover. And the sad thing is a lot of the companies that put in the spray foam, another one's removing it. So it's basically, if you see spray foam, almost always has to come out for the bank.
Well, this is the thing that I've seen so many times, where it's a case of, we're buying this property, but it's got spray foam insulation. And it's a case of, okay, well, if you want to, and the lender isn't aware of it, then that's on you. But I wouldn't. It could be quite dangerous because, and this is the thing, of course, if moisture is into the rafters, the roofs, the rafters start to rot. Of course, the first time you as a homeowner are going to find out is when something goes particularly badly with the roof, isn't it? And then it's a very expensive job to fix, and you may not have the cash, you may not have the equity to finance it, and then you've got a home that you can't sell potentially.
Yes, or you're spending again 15 to 30 grand on a new roof,
So
which is major cost.
So what else? So what else is in the roof that you might be looking at other than spray foam?
Overall roof structure, how it's restrained, how it's like looking for lateral restraint to gable walls, things like that, to make sure the walls are secured in the roof structure. Chimney breasts, which is a big one, especially lately, for me at least, is people remove chimney breasts a lot. So people get upset that there's a chimney breast on the first floor taking up their prime real estate and decide that it needs to come out. And they did so 40, 50 years ago and completely removed that chimney breast, leaving the literal ton of brickwork above unsupported. And that might be okay for now. But then if the neighbor comes along and goes, I don't like my chimney breast either, 40 years later, and removes it, then you could have a catastrophic failure and could be very dangerous. So you're looking for chimney. So before even going to the lofts, I'm actually looking in the rooms to say, how many chimney breasts do we have in this property? Where are they? And then I look for them on the first floor, and then I go up into the loft to see if I can see them. And then I try to look at the base of the chimney breasts in the loft space to see if they're supported by anything.
Okay, so we've come out of the roof. We're doing the rooms now. So, of course, one of the things that I see regularly when customers had a level 2 or a level 3 survey is where they're always saying, we've not checked the electrics, we've not checked the plumbing because we're not qualified to. We're not electricians, we're not gas engineers, etc. Many people, I think, often confuse the survey because they're thinking about, the electrics okay? Is the plumbing okay? And then they sometimes get a little bit shocked that, the report says, we're not qualified to talk about this. Or there might be a very brief kind of short comment about, we think it's X amount of years old. You should probably get this checked out. Do you think that people are unaware that that is the case when it comes to getting a survey with things like electrics and plumbing?
So it's broader. So the thing, when you're getting so there's a lot of talk about getting a survey, and then if the survey misses something, you can sue them. And around that has almost created this idea that this is like a warranty or a guarantee that your house is fine. It's not. So when you're thinking about a survey, you have to think of it as a risk analysis. It is a professional risk analysis of your purchase, and then take that aspect and put it towards everything in the property, including services. So we aren't checking the gas, the electrics, all those things. It's not possible for one person to be competent in all of those things. But we are doing a risk analysis on the fittings. So if I walk into a room and I see outdated plug sockets, there's only one in every room, there's an outdated consumer unit, then I'm saying you could be looking at a rewire here. Because by the time you've added on all your sockets and everything, a rewire just makes sense. And then the same thing with gas. And you go, okay, well, how old's the boiler? Is it a combi boiler that's just a bit dated, or are we looking at a full system upgrade? Are we looking at an asbestos water tank in the loft space we're looking to remove? All these things fitted into your preferences for the property. I've done a lot of properties where cosmetically it looks fine. They've even put in a lot of money into it to make it look quite good. New kitchen, new bathroom, whatever that may be. But then you go to the services and you've got a asbestos water tank in the loft. You've got an old hot water cylinder. You've got an old boiler. And then I'm saying, and old electrics. I'm like, to fix all of this, well, you might be looking at heavy refurbishment into this area that is now freshly redone, which you need to consider. So that's the risk analysis part of that, which people like to put off the hidden things. So that's the point of us commenting on those aspects. So you understand that there could be costs associated with them.
And so when it comes to those kind of things, what should buyers be looking to do once they've had? Well, we'll go through in more depth a little bit more about the survey. For example, the survey report's come back. Apologies for people that are watching this jumping about, but it's come back. And should they be getting a gas engineer, an electrician to go and have a look at the property? Or should they rely upon the legal checks that the conveyancer might do to get kind of gas safety certificates, to get electrical certification, to get the fencer certification for the windows, for example?
So a point to make is that on your survey report is almost guaranteed that for most surveyors, that your services will come back as reds just because they haven't been checked for health and safety. There's a lot of debate in our profession about whether that's appropriate or not. But as it stands at this time and date, that's how people do it. So be prepared for that. As far as further investigations, it depends on the quality of the boiler. If the boiler looks brand new, then you're basically asking for a servicing history, because that needs to be serviced every year. And then if it hasn't been serviced, then you want it serviced and checked. Then if it's been serviced in the last 12 months and it looks like a new boiler, then at your discretion, you can get that checked again if you want, but it might be safe to assume that it's fine. Electrics, there's no requirement to check electrics, but it's advised that it's checked I think it's every 10 years and then on change of ownership. So then for that, we advise an EICR, which is basically just an inspection to test the circuits, see if there's anything that's not functioning how it's supposed to function. And that I almost recommend for virtually every report. That, and then on top of that, for me as well, a touchy area for me is drains, because I am very hyper focused when I'm in a property. And one thing that really bugs me is not being able to see drains, and they can be expensive. So if there's any reason at all to be concerned about drains, my attitude is get a CCTV drain inspection. Which is basically they'll come around, they'll clear it out, they'll put a pipe down, a camera down, and inspect your pipes and go, oh, is there anything here we need to worry about? Because the last thing you need is a pipe that runs under your house having a problem and then you have to dig up your house. And that's just something that no surveyor is going to tell you about. And they might just completely leave it out. So that is something that many people I think should consider as well.
So do you think it should almost be mandatory that when people are buying a home or selling a home, that they should be these checks, that the level 3 should be mandatory? Because I wonder how many people own homes currently that are unaware of problems that are manifesting. They may not be immediate issues right now, but are building up to becoming immediate issues that could be rectified, but they never knew they were even potentially going to start becoming an issue because they never had a check. And most people, let's be honest, they don't stumble across a surveyor in their pub. I assume, in the same way that most people, when they're out and about, don't stumble across a mortgage advisor or don't stumble across a conveyancer. So would you say that there's an awful lot of kind of hidden issues within the housing stock across the UK that is kind of building up because we've got such old housing stock that at some point, in the next, 10, 15, 20 years might start to become an issue?
So you kind of touched on a very sensitive topic in the surveying world right now because of this new home buying consultation. When they're hoping to reform the whole system, there's a big question of condition reports when the property is listed. And in a perfect world where every surveyor is operating to a high standard and doing thorough work every time, that would be a great idea. And I think to most lay people and people maybe not familiar with surveyors would say that sounds like a no-brainer. But there's a lot of incentives in there that could make it worse off. So if you're a seller and you have no responsibility to fix the issues in your property, if your future buyer has a problem a couple years down the road, then you're going to try to find the surveyor that maybe will just skim through it and not write that there's anything bad. Meanwhile, a surveyor that's doing a really thorough job might find things that the other one might not. And then is there a conflict of interest between the seller and the surveyor to provide all that information? If the seller is the one instructing the surveyor and the surveyor comes around and goes, oh yeah, this is a problem. And then the seller comes around and says, no, it's not. I've had this for years. It's been fine, which is normally the pushback we get when we're doing the buyer's reports. How does that translate to the buyer? So there's a lot that needs to be figured out. I think there is a lot of room for basic checks. For instance, it's really silly for me, for someone to pay a level 3 survey, have me come in and see that there's a ladder going up to a converted loft space that clearly doesn't have building regulations and no one's told the buyer yet. And that's a no-brainer for them. And then I'm just standing there going, I could have told you that ages ago. And why'd you pay that? So that's a big thing. So if there's something that just someone walks through the property, checks for extensions, building regulations, asks for that documentation, asks for the searches, packs like that, then I think that makes a lot of sense. And something that a lot of people bring up is Scotland. So everyone will go, oh, Scotland, they do condition reports on selling. Sounds like a great idea. No offense to Scottish surveyors, but if you go read a Scottish survey, they're poor.
Well, this is one of the things, you see, because I am so frustrated, and I have been for 11 years. As a mortgage broker, I've been in this game now for 11 years. And I do get so frustrated with the entire process because I always feel as though when it comes to selling a home, essentially, if you're selling a home, you're not doing any checks yourself before you list your home, and most people, to be fair, don't. Most people don't want to go and spend money on a level 3 survey with a good surveyor to understand what are they selling, what's the asset they're selling, because they either don't think it's required because they think, well, the buyer's going to get the survey, or they think, well, I don't want to know what the problems are because then I kind of feel compelled to tell someone about it, or it might devalue the asset that I'm selling. But it all just rests upon hope, because of course, if there are problems there that will need rectifying, or that meaningfully devalues the value of the asset because there's significant work to be done, or even if it's not significant, let's be honest, for example, removing spray foam insulation, that's not going to be particularly cheap, particularly if it's had an impact on the roof, and then that needs fixing. It could be that you mentioned with the drains, oh my God, we're going to have to now dig out half the garden to get this sorted. But it seems odd to me, it doesn't make sense logically, that someone is putting up for sale something that someone's going to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on. And whether it completes is just hope. It may be hope that everything passes, or hope that the buyer doesn't get a high level of survey. And we know, don't we, that, what is it, something like only about half of people that buy a home get a high level of survey. I think it's not a huge
The
amount.
numbers
So
are
I don't
all
know
over the place. We have no statistical, like, accurate numbers on, like, we at one point it was 1 in 5 people, and that's the number I've been quoting. And then a report was shared recently saying that it's like 60 something percent. But then again, people are confusing valuation with a survey. So the questions, like, my guess is maybe 40-50% are getting surveys. That's an absolute wild guess, but yeah.
So there's half the people that are spending across the country billions of pounds a year on mortgages, on property, that they walking into a home that they may not know what is really under the surface. But when it comes to selling, the number of times I see a scenario where the buyer makes an offer, and I predominantly deal with first-time buyers. The buyer makes an offer, the offer's accepted, we go through the process, we get to the point I say, look, you should be getting a high level of survey. They have that high level of survey, and then it uncovers all manner of things. And then the seller doesn't want to, or is digging their heels in about the costs of work. So in the level 3 survey, it may be saying that, X, Y, and Z needs doing, and I estimate those costs to be approximately, I don't know, £12,000. And I say to the buyer, well, maybe just ask for the £12,000 off, or push back on the seller and say, well, okay, we'll stick at the current price, but you pay the £12,000 to get this work done. I always am cautious of that, because incentive is, I don't want to spend £12,000, so I'm going to get someone to do it, budgetingscarpa.co.uk, because I'm not going to get any benefit from this. But it all seems bizarre that effectively when we're selling, and think of the size of the housing market, it's of enormous importance for the UK economy. It's all just based on hopes and wishes, rather than, if you know something about the property that you're selling at the outset, you can either rectify it, or you can market it at a price that takes account of it. Because when you think that 1 in 3 transactions falls down, 50% of homes that list for sale never sell, the amount of wasted time, effort, and money that could all be spent better. And so I do see why the kind of the quality of surveyor obviously matters, and where the incentives align matters. But I just wish that there was more upfront information for buyers and for sellers, so it at least manages their expectations, but particularly around pricing. But so you think that the kind of the change to the we'll call them HIPs. I know they're not HIPs, but the home information packs, whatever the terminology ends up being. So do you think that could cause even more problems because of the incentives and how that might be managed?
Yeah, so my concern with that is people know they need to get a survey. They go to the estate agent. They ask the estate agent, who should I get? The estate agent says large corporate, who they have a referral fee network with, and every good surveyor that's independent just gets wiped off. It's like, I'm not saying that just from like my own personal like, I want to be a practicing surveyor, but I just see that being a complete detriment to the profession as a whole and our reputation and the end consumer, because then it will be a matter of, I'll just bin it. Like, we have to pay for this. It's going to be a thing that's going to be mandatory. You have to pay for this condition report. You get the condition report and you bin it off because it's useless. And then no one is actually better off at the end. And then there will be a select few that instruct, hopefully at least at the beginning, to get level 3 surveys. And then level 3 is going to look at this condition report and go, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Which is what I do for EPCs. I look at EPCs, for energy performance certificates, and I'll go into a house and I'll go, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Just ignore this, because if you plan on doing any work, you need to get a retrofit coordinator, because that's not really accurate here. It hasn't taken into account the fact that the walls are sopping wet, and things like that. So that's my main concern with that. I do think there is a way we can do this well. It just needs to be done with our eyes open and with people understanding these conflicts, rather than feeling the pressure to just push this through for the sake of saying it's progress for the sake of it.
So how would you do it? How would you do it in order to, because there's certain things I would do with the mortgage process, certainly to make things easy for buyers, but I'm not a surveyor, never have been, never will be. What would you do if you could design a system to make home buying and selling easier, more transparent, and safer for people? What would you do in an ideal world?
I'm going to ask you to help me here, because I'm going to get sidetracked if I don't mention both of them off the gate. One is property logs, and two, which I've already forgotten, damn it. Property logs and, well, I'll start talking about property logs and then hopefully it will come back. Property logs. So the idea is that when there's a house, the house has a living history. So it's a living document where if I'm a surveyor going into property, I can see the work that other surveyors have done, other builders have done, photos of the work they've done, and I can just basically go through and make sure everything makes sense, rather than every time you buy a house, you're going in and trying to deconstruct the history of it. If I'm going into a 17th century cottage, I'm walking into generations of people fiddling with it, with what materials, what reinforcement, was this beam there originally? And I'm guessing a lot of it. So that sounds like a great idea, but it needs to come with protections for surveyors. A surveyor acting in a competent fashion can be wrong. And if they're found to be wrong, it doesn't mean that you can go, oh my God, this guy was wrong, sue the hell out of him. It's like, no, if he was doing his job and he was doing his best, but this is an incorrect conclusion, that needs to be understood as that. Because if you're going to ask people to come to the table openly in that fashion, and with surveyors being happy for other people to read and rely on their reports, they need that protection. But with protection, you also end up protecting people that are just doing bad work. So there's a line there that needs to be walked as well. And I remember the second one, making sellers partially responsible for repair works after completion for however many years. I can't remember the exact country. I heard another surveyor mention it, but they have a system where for like 5 years after completion, if a major or hidden repair work has come up, the seller is responsible. And I think that could be a big step as well, because if they're responsible, then you can bring everyone together that has the same incentive. Everyone's incentive is what is wrong with this house? What can go wrong? Now, then you can talk to the estate agent, you can talk to the vendor, you can talk to the buyer, and they can get hopefully to that right fee, whatever that might be, that right price for that house. Of course, there'll be conflicts and things like that, but I think that's a step forward.
You see, I think that is a very good idea, where it's a case of the seller is still responsible after the event for a period of time. Because, where, for example, let's say a drain collapses. Let's say a drain collapses, or let's say a drain is leaking and it absolutely nails the foundations of a property, an old property, whatever it may be. Let's say a Victorian property where the foundations aren't particularly deep, and then all of a sudden you've got to have it, dug out, underpinned. Yeah, I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds worth of work. I do agree with that, and you're right. That would then incentivize everyone to be, and also for property maintenance. And ultimately, that's a good thing, right? Because if a property is well maintained, it's generally it's going to hold its value better or increasing value more. So, real downside here. Not that I can see. There must be a downside. There's probably a blind spot somewhere, but
yeah, there's always a give and take. But it incentivizes sellers to not want to hide things as well, which is a big thing that surveyors find. I walk into a house and I smell fresh paint in a sub-ground floor basement flat in London. I'm like, oh God. I was like, there's damp in here somewhere. I just got to find it. Like, I know, like that. You might as well just tell me at the door. Put a sign on the door. And it's things like that. And it's like, that's just bad practice. And it makes, like, guess what the report's going to look like when it gets to my client's hands. It's not going to be like, oh, I think everything's okay. It's like, no, they've attempted to hide things very obviously from me. And I'm warning you about that because I want you to be aware of that. So the way I write my reports, especially for buyers, is for them to be aware of everything they need to be concerned about, which again, from a seller, they might think that is overly cautious or whatever it may be. Like, I have to cover everything because especially every buyer is unique. Every buyer has a different risk tolerance. I have to just kind of lay it all out there and then they can read it. And then we can kind of figure that out together on the phone or over a Zoom to see where they lie on this property. But for a seller,
it's a very good point because, for example, when I'm talking to first-time buyers, I'm very, very cautious when it comes to the selection of property because, for example, and this is becoming more of an issue because first-time buyers typically have a smaller deposit because they're at the start and house prices are astronomical in relation to wages. We all know that's an issue. And so therefore, when they're looking at the property and I'm saying, well, hang on a minute, it's like, to me, just on the face of it, you're saying we're going to do a renovation. Most first-time buyers, unless they're actively involved in the construction trade, aware of how much materials cost us, how much labor costs us, how much time it's going to take. They're also often not aware that you start trying to fix problem one and you then uncover three more. So that cost of it's only going to cost £2,500. All of a sudden, actually, oh no, we've got to do this and this, and now it's now £10,000, and we've started, and so we can't leave it as it is, and we don't have £10,000. And so I'm seeing it quite a lot at the moment where first-time buyers are looking for that typical worst house on the best street. But I'm trying to say, yeah, but you don't have the capital to do this. I might, because I've got tons of equity in my home and I understand how much work that is going to take and how long it will take and what a meaningful contingency fund would look like. You're thinking a contingency fund is 1,000. I'm thinking a contingency fund on that is 15,000. We are not the same. So I do worry for first-time buyers, particularly because their money's short, they're not getting high levels of survey, and they're walking into something that is potentially catastrophic for them. And do you have those conversations with buyers? Because obviously, you mentioned that surveying, the various levels of quality of surveying.
Yeah, so that's probably the number one thing. So with my reports, a lot of them, it is a lot of people thinking they're getting a really good deal And then I'm going in and kind of bursting the bubble, being like, there's this you have to worry about, this you have to worry about, all these other things. And a lot of the time, they might be aware that there's going to be problems, but they might not be aware about the amount of effort it's going to take to rectify them. So I used to really have this kind of attitude of this stuff's complicated, hire professionals to do everything. But as I've grown in my profession, I'm like, that's not possible these days. I understand that there are first-time buyers out there that want a house. They have the option of buying a fixer-upper and they plan on doing a lot of it themselves. I want that to be doable for them. And that's something I'm trying to do with my content now, is put out that information to not necessarily show you how to do everything like a DIY channel, but show you how to ask the right questions. Because every house is different, that you now have to find a appropriate solution to. And as long as you can ask the right questions, then you can speak to professionals and they'll hopefully guide you to the right answers. But I've completely got sidetracked. With first-time buyers and the concerns related to buying a quote-unquote money pit, it is a case-by-case basis. And it's like I said, it's them being concerned about how long things are going to take. I was talking to people like, 6 months and it'll be good. I'm like, no, you're looking at like 2 years plus if you're doing this yourself. Number one question, do you plan on living in the property when you're fixing it up? If you're living at home and you're buying a house that's a complete doer-upper, one, you'll be able to sleep at night. That'll be easy. Two, you'll be able to mitigate a lot of costs because you'll be able to just rip it all out, make it not habitable, and then start building it back up. And you can do things at the same times, address everything at once, rather than going room by room and then realizing that, A was connected to B and now B is actually broken in room C that we've already done room C, and having to go back and all those things. So if you're living at home and you're buying a house, that's a big plus. Because then you can just go tear through it all at once, and yeah.
So I will jump in on that point from a mortgage standpoint, because there's a little bit of a not a conflict, it's the wrong word, but that's the best thing I can think of right now. The whole thing of living at home, just from a mortgage standpoint, I'll just get this out there for regulatory purposes, because this is one of the things that I do see sometimes where first-time buyers say, I'm going to buy this house, it's run down, but it's got a functioning kitchen and bathroom, so we can get a mortgage on it, and it is mortgageable, but we're going to rip all this stuff out and I'm going to live at home for 6 months. Now, one of the issues from a mortgage perspective is that as part of the mortgage contract, you have to have buildings insurance, and the buildings insurance is only valid if someone's living in the property on a continuous basis. My worry with that is always they get buildings insurance, they're not living there, they've never actively lived there, something goes wrong, they try to start ripping something out, the house falls down, the roof caves in, whatever it might be, they want to go and claim on the buildings insurance, the insurer says, we're not paying out, you're not living here, your insurance is invalid. You're not within the terms of the insurance. Not only is the problem then that the insurance isn't going to cover them, they're then in breach of the mortgage contract. That can have a pretty significant knock-on effect. So I would just say, for my own,
no, that's a really good point. Yeah,
just be very, very careful with that.
No,
because
that's a very good point.
It's because that does worry me sometimes, especially when it's a case of we're going to rip everything out, take it back to brick, and I'm thinking, oh my god, I hope you've really got enough cash to do this. Because
absolutely. Because that's the thing I say to them as well. It's like the last place you want to be, which I've inspected properties where people are selling their houses because of this, is where they've bought the house, they've thought that they have everything mapped out, and they run out of money halfway through a renovation, and they've got bare brick walls, and they've got a gutted kitchen and bathroom, but they have to sell the place. So it is having a healthy budget and not understanding that. Like, I know a story of a chartered surveyor with like 30, 40 years experience went 2.5 times over budget on a renovation. Heavy renovation, but 2.5 times over budget. So you have to be prepared for that in whichever way that's possible. But that's a really good point about the building insurance. That's something I need to take on board, 100%.
So in terms of first-time buyers, what could they do visually themselves when it comes to inspecting the property, when it comes to viewings? Because often first-time buyers, it's always emotional. It's always emotional, and we shouldn't expect anyone to remove that, because if you're going to live there, you've got to have a connection to the property you're living. You've got to be happy with it, and you've got to want to live there. So you can't ever remove that emotion, and you shouldn't need to. But what can first-time buyers do particularly? What advice can you give to them that helps them make a decision? The obvious things that they can do, the obvious questions they can ask, the data that they can mine. I mean, I give people SPRIFT reports to say, that's the information that I can give to you, so that, and it gives an automated valuation. Sometimes they tend to be reasonably accurate, but it gives them an awful lot of information that they wouldn't necessarily find elsewhere. But other than that, the checks that they could ask, the questions, what would they be, Dan?
It's a difficult one, because on one hand, I kind of want to tell people, don't worry about the condition of the property beyond anything obvious that you could see originally. If I'm sure if you're buying a house, you are quite a smart person. Going into a house, if you see anything that jumps out at you, that's probably a problem, something you want to be aware of. But you might not know the exact cause or how serious that actually is. My main advice to buyers is if you're looking at a house, go ask the questions that are personal to you that only you can answer. Is, do you actually want to live here? How much do you love this house? Do you see your kids playing football in the back garden, things like that? And then hiring a professional to do it. You as a layperson, for your 10 to 15-minute viewings, trying to find everything wrong with the property, it takes me 2.5, 3 hours as a professional in your property to cover everything I want to. You're just not going to see everything. And I say, really don't try too hard to do that. But if you are the kind of person that wants to understand houses, learn these things, you can go watch loads of content, watch my content, learn about houses, and then these things will jump out to you on your viewings. You'll say, oh, where's the damp-proof course? Is it bridged by an external render? You'll say, what kind of floor construction is this? What kind of roof construction is this? For instance, when I come to buy a house, I'm still renting, but when I come to buy a house, I won't need to be there for 2.5, 3 hours to do a thorough survey because I'm not documenting everything. I'm just doing it for myself. And I'd be able to do it probably in about half an hour to an hour, just being able to walk around and go, well, what is everything? So you can do that. But if you have no experience, educate yourself, make sure you're knowledgeable because you also want to understand the reports when it comes back to you, that you can understand and comprehend those things. But I would say don't stress too much about it.
Okay. I mean, to be fair, that's good advice. In terms of the in terms of trying to find a good surveyor, this is an issue that many people struggle with because it's like anything. I always have this issue with reviews, right? And I suspect you're gonna. I suspect you will probably agree with this. Often with kind of Google reviews or Trustpilot reviews, whatever it might be, that's coming from a person that doesn't understand the technicalities and what's gone off in the background. And so effectively, a Google review is a bit like the blind leading the blind. It's akin to, asking a surgery patient, was your surgeon good? Well, only another surgeon can answer that because they're the ones that actually understand what they've done and how they've operated on you. So asking a customer, is that surveyor good? Oh, our surveyor was brilliant. Yeah, but how do you know? Because you don't understand the technicalities of surveying. In the same way, was that mortgage broker good? Well, you don't understand the technicalities of mortgage broking and financial regulation, so you wouldn't be able to. So I'm always very cautious of saying, just look at reviews because they are from people that don't understand what's actually happened. I'm guessing you probably are along the same line.
Yeah, I would say reviews are very good at telling you about the customer's experience. So there's a correlation between good experience and good outcome and being happy. So is it helpful? Yes. But again, it's the customer's experience. And then same thing with surveying is a lot of surveying. Like I say, there's often where I would rather have a fresh graduate that's willing to spend 5 hours at the property, take 1,000 photos, all their notes, go back, study it, take 2 weeks to write the report, then a fellow who's been doing it for 30 years is a bit tired of it and only spends half an hour there, dictates it, and has his assistant write it up. So there's that as well. Is the best way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. It's a very fair point. I think we see that with mortgages, where, for example, potentially people towards maybe they've been in mortgages for much longer than I have, coming towards the end of the career, and it may be the case that you see an overwhelming amount of business to one lender, and think, was that really the right lender, or was that just kind of, I know how that system works, I know they'll probably be okay with this, and therefore that's what's going to happen. So you do see that, and it's, and honestly, I can see why that happens because you do become jaded over time. If you're 3 years into running your business, I suspect you'll feel a little bit different in 30 years, I guess.
Yeah.
And I will with mortgages.
And that's something I'm very cautious of. I'm very aware that I do not want to become bitter because I can understand getting a couple claims, getting a few complaints and going, I'm not going to write that report section like this anymore because that got me a complaint. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to cover my ass a bit more. Which again, it's just courage in that face of that to kind of just say no, like even if you have a nasty client, whatever it might be, that you just try to do your best for every client, which I hope to stay optimistic and hopeful in that regard.
Absolutely. Well, that's been illuminating, and I genuinely want to thank you for your time, Dan.
Absolutely.
It's been really useful.
Talk for hours about this stuff, and I hope everyone listening got something from it. But all I can say is just don't assume. So on the regard of finding a good surveyor, there's basically two ways when you Google it of ways that you're going to find surveying. One is going to be through a comparison website. And the way those normally work is you will fill out your information. They will send the lead to 5 to 10 surveyors or 3 to 10 surveyors, and they'll then try call you and compete for your work. Obviously, be cautious of all those different fees, but then ask the questions that I mentioned previously. And then, or you can just look for local surveyors in your area. Doing residential surveys, I think it's like 70% of surveying is independents. So there will be someone in your area and just try have a chat with them. And they should be more than happy to kind of break down what it is they do and learn about them. And as long as you're coming to the table wanting to understand them and have that communication, then they should be happy to have that as well. One thing I'll say, do not do this day and age is do not just go to ChatGPT and say, give me a list of questions that I should be asking a surveyor, because we get them and it's like 30 questions. I'm like, I'm going to be doing all of this, but this is clearly you just asked ChatGPT this. So don't do that.
Yeah, do you know what? Honestly, I get that all the time. I get that all the time now. Claude said X. I'm like, oh, but Claude's wrong.
Yeah.
But no, that's fantastic. So, and if you want to follow Dan, it's Dan the Surveyor Man on Instagram. I assume it's the same handle on TikTok, is it? Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone for joining us. Hopefully that's been useful. Drop any questions in the comments, and hopefully one of us will be able to get back to you.
Thank you.
Right.